In the azure waters of the Indian Ocean, where cyclones dance with the trade winds and political storms rage as fiercely as nature's own fury, stood an airline that embodied the resilience of Madagascar itself. Air Madagascar, known locally as Air Mad, carried the dreams of 26 million Malagasy people for 57 years, connecting their island nation to the world while surviving military coups, economic collapse, natural disasters, and political upheavals that would have grounded lesser carriers permanently. Yet this remarkable airline that weathered revolution after revolution, cyclone after cyclone, and crisis after crisis, ultimately met its match not in the barrel of a gun or the eye of a storm, but in the cold mathematics of fuel costs and the relentless pressure of international competition. The story begins in 1962, when Madagascar had just gained independence from France 3 years earlier, and the young republic needed wings to soar beyond its colonial past. Air Madagascar emerged from the transformation of Madagascar's aviation sector, initially established with French technical assistance and a modest fleet that included Douglas DC-4 and DC-6 aircraft inherited from the colonial era. The airline's first headquarters occupied a modest building at Ivato International Airport in Antananarivo, the capital city perched high in the island's central highlands. From these humble beginnings, Air Madagascar launched domestic services connecting the capital to regional centers like Toamasina, Mahajanga, and Toliara, cities scattered across an island nearly the size of France. The early years saw the airline operating with just 3 aircraft, serving 8 domestic destinations and employing fewer than 200 people. By 1965, Air Madagascar had expanded internationally with its first service to Nairobi, marking the beginning of its role as Madagascar's flag carrier and gateway to the world. The airline's growth trajectory accelerated through the 1970s and 80s, even as Madagascar's political landscape shifted like quicksand beneath everyone's feet. Air Madagascar added Boeing 737s to its fleet in 1972, enabling more reliable service to regional destinations across the Indian Ocean. The carrier established crucial routes to Mauritius in 1974, providing Malagasy travelers their first regular connection to the prosperous island nation that had become a regional business hub. By 1978, Air Madagascar operated 12 aircraft and served 15 destinations, including new international routes to Paris and Rome that connected Madagascar directly to Europe for the first time. The airline employed over 800 people by 1980, making it one of Madagascar's largest employers and a source of national pride. Service to Johannesburg launched in 1981, opening Madagascar to South African business travelers and tourists drawn to the island's unique wildlife and pristine beaches. The Comoros route, established in 1983, created an island-hopping network that served the scattered nations of the Western Indian Ocean. However, Madagascar's political instability began testing Air Madagascar's resilience in ways that no business plan could have anticipated. The country endured a military coup in 1975 that brought Admiral Didier Ratsiraka to power, ushering in nearly 2 decades of socialist policies that isolated Madagascar economically and strained the airline's international partnerships. Air Madagascar faced severe foreign currency shortages throughout the 1980s, making it nearly impossible to purchase spare parts, fuel, and new aircraft needed for expansion. The airline was forced to ground aircraft for months at a time due to maintenance issues, reducing its operational fleet to as few as 6 aircraft by 1985. During the political crisis of 1991, when massive protests demanded democratic reforms, Air Madagascar continued operating even as riots paralyzed Antananarivo and other major cities. The airline's pilots and ground crews showed remarkable dedication, maintaining service despite irregular paychecks and uncertain working conditions that saw some employees go months without full salaries. The return to democratic governance in 1993 brought new hope for Air Madagascar, but also new challenges as the liberalized economy exposed the carrier to international competition for the first time. The airline modernized its fleet with the acquisition of Boeing 767s in 1995, enabling non-stop service to Paris and reducing travel times to Europe significantly. Air Madagascar expanded its African network throughout the late 1990s, adding routes to Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and Addis Ababa that positioned the carrier as a regional player connecting East Africa to the Indian Ocean islands. The airline's domestic network reached its peak in 1998, serving 23 destinations across Madagascar's challenging terrain of mountains, rainforests, and remote coastal areas, where ground transportation remained difficult or impossible. Partnership agreements with Air France in 1999 provided code-sharing opportunities and technical support that enhanced Air Madagascar's operational capabilities. By 2000, the carrier employed over 1,500 people and operated a fleet of 16 aircraft, representing the pinnacle of its operational scope and ambition. Yet the new millennium brought unprecedented challenges that would test every lesson Air Madagascar had learned during its turbulent first 4 decades. The political crisis of 2002, triggered by disputed presidential election results, saw Madagascar effectively split into 2 governments for months, while international recognition and aid hung in the balance. Air Madagascar found itself caught between competing political authorities, with different factions claiming control over the airline's management and routes. International airlines suspended service to Madagascar during the crisis, leaving Air Madagascar as virtually the only carrier maintaining connections between the island and the outside world. The airline's aircraft were sometimes grounded by fuel shortages as competing governments controlled different ports and supply chains. European tourists, who had become increasingly important to Madagascar's economy and Air Madagascar's passenger loads, stayed away in droves as travel advisories warned against visiting the politically unstable island. The challenges intensified dramatically after 2008, when Madagascar experienced another political crisis that would prove even more devastating than previous upheavals. A military-backed coup removed President Marc Ravalomanana from power, installing Andry Rajoelina as interim leader and triggering immediate international sanctions from the African Union, European Union, and United States. Air Madagascar lost crucial technical support agreements with European partners as sanctions prohibited various forms of cooperation with Madagascar's unrecognized government. The airline's fleet began aging rapidly without adequate maintenance support, forcing the grounding of several aircraft and reducing operational reliability. International routes became increasingly difficult to maintain as fuel costs soared and passenger demand plummeted due to Madagascar's pariah status in the international community. The European Union's decision to blacklist Air Madagascar from European airspace in 2011 dealt a crushing blow, forcing the airline to cancel its direct Paris route and rely on partnerships with other carriers for European connections. Fuel costs emerged as Air Madagascar's most relentless enemy during the 2010s, creating an economic vice that tightened with each passing year. The airline's location in the Indian Ocean meant that fuel had to be imported at premium prices, while the small size of Madagascar's market provided little leverage in negotiations with suppliers. Air Madagascar's aging fleet consumed fuel less efficiently than newer aircraft operated by competitors, creating a disadvantage that worsened as fuel prices climbed higher. The airline attempted to hedge fuel costs through various financial instruments, but Madagascar's limited credit worthiness made such arrangements expensive and difficult to obtain. By 2015, fuel costs represented over 40% of Air Madagascar's operating expenses, a proportion that made profitability nearly impossible on many routes. The carrier was forced to implement fuel surcharges and reduce flight frequencies, driving away price-sensitive passengers and creating a downward spiral of declining revenues and deteriorating service quality. Competition from international carriers accelerated Air Madagascar's decline as the global aviation industry evolved rapidly around the struggling island carrier. Ethiopian Airlines launched service to Antananarivo in 2012, offering superior aircraft, more frequent schedules, and better connections to global destinations through its Addis Ababa hub. Air Austral from neighboring Réunion expanded its Madagascar operations, leveraging its modern fleet and French government support to capture market share on lucrative routes. Turkish Airlines entered the Madagascar market in 2016, providing new options for passengers traveling between Madagascar and Europe or Asia through Istanbul's massive hub. Emirates began serving Antananarivo in 2018, bringing the world's largest international airline into direct competition with Air Madagascar on key routes to Europe and Asia. These competitors operated newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft while benefiting from larger route networks, superior maintenance facilities, and stronger financial backing that Air Madagascar simply could not match. The final chapter of Air Madagascar's story unfolded with heartbreaking inevitability as the airline struggled against overwhelming financial pressures that no amount of resilience could overcome. The carrier's debt burden reached unsustainable levels by 2017, with obligations to fuel suppliers, maintenance providers, and aircraft lessors creating a complex web of financial constraints. Several aircraft were repossessed by lessors, reducing Air Madagascar's operational fleet to just 8 aircraft by 2018, and forcing the cancellation of numerous routes that had served isolated communities for decades. Employee strikes became increasingly common as salary payments fell further behind schedule, disrupting operations and damaging the airline's already fragile reputation for reliability. The Madagascar government, facing its own fiscal constraints and competing priorities, proved unable to provide the substantial financial support needed to modernize Air Madagascar's fleet and operations. International lenders and potential investors showed little interest in supporting an airline based in a politically unstable country with limited market size and challenging operational environment. The end came in November 2019, when Air Madagascar suspended all operations after 57 years of defying the odds and serving one of the world's most challenging aviation markets. The airline's final flight departed Antananarivo for Paris on November 15th, carrying passengers who had no idea they were witnessing the conclusion of an extraordinary aviation story. Air Madagascar's collapse left Madagascar temporarily without a flag carrier, forcing the country to rely entirely on foreign airlines for international connections and disrupting domestic service to remote areas that had depended on the airline for access to medical care, education, and economic opportunities. The carrier's failure eliminated over 2,000 jobs and marked the end of Madagascar's aviation independence, a dream that had seemed achievable during the optimistic early years following independence. Despite multiple attempts to revive operations and restructure the airline's finances, Air Madagascar remained grounded, its aircraft scattered across different continents, and its proud history reduced to memories of an airline that had survived everything except the unforgiving economics of modern aviation. The story of Air Madagascar serves as a poignant reminder that in the global airline industry, courage and determination, while admirable, cannot indefinitely substitute for financial sustainability and operational efficiency in an increasingly competitive marketplace.